Without a doubt, one of the most talked about anime at the end of 2018 has been a tribute to all things tokusatsu. Trigger's SSSS.Gridman. That's a lot of S's. Which makes sense. It's got great fights, fun characters, and a big mystery to solve. Even the name Trigger just draws in the audience. Considering it's remaking an early 90s Power Rangers style Americanized tokusatsu, it's impressive. Gridman kept its audience's interest over the series' 12-episode run. I mean, a $100 million production only landed the 2017 Power Rangers movie mixed reviews. So why does Gridman work? And is Gridman Studio Trigger at its best? Well, about to find out. Trying to revive a classic is hard, and there's been plenty of evidence just this past year. Cardcaptor Sakura, Clear Card, Megalobox, Devilman Crybaby, and Cutie Honey were all taking a shot at bringing back old classics. But only Devilman's psychedelic reimagining by Masaki Yuasa made a splash. But that's just anime. Basically, making reimaginings of even the most stellar series is a big gamble. The same story beats won't always work 10 years down the line. Maybe the themes of the original work, which resonated at the time, just don't apply to the next generation of audiences. Outside of a few special examples, it seems like new adaptations of old TV series, movies, and comic books are all nail-biters for viewers. There aren't too many names out there who you can trust to faithfully adapt classic properties. It's not easy balancing between pleasing old fans and getting new fans. But one of the more trusted names in the business is Studio Trigger. Trigger just brings the magic of their own childhood to a new generation with their bombastic storytelling and animation. Their work has an undeniable appeal for modern audiences, and their dedication to the properties of their youth, that are probably why these people are making anime in the first place, shines through. Personally, I think the secret spice is that Trigger doesn't try to recreate the same story beat for beat. They try to recreate the experience and feelings of watching TV when they were kids. I mean, just one look at their catalog and you'll see what I mean. And where better to start than Gurren Lagann? Even before Trigger, the founding members of the studio, which at the time were still working at Gainax, put together an homage to the super robot genre. This project would springboard Hiroyuki Imaishi from respected animator in the industry to an internationally recognized name. However, a lot of the groundwork was laid by writer Kazuki Nakashima, who cited Ken Ishikawa and Go Nagai's GetintheRobot as his primary inspiration. I know I just attacked you with a lot of names, I barely pronounced them, but just stay with me here. When Imaishi entered the picture, the plan changed to loading up the series with homages to super robot anime, with Nakashima handling references from the 70s and Imaishi the 80s. For the most part, super robot shows tend to have an optimistic tone and a laser focus on the powerful, world-shifting force of a single individual's burning passion. Gurren Lagann took this idea to its illogical conclusion by making its mecha literally powered by its pilot's fighting spirit. The increasingly dated ideas of super robots were elevated by Imaishi's crew, who unapologetically reveled in the absurdity of their own premise. Rather than following the industry trend and pull away from super robots, they doubled down. And so the show, almost magically, found a following even among previously unreceptive Western audiences. Gurren Lagann recreated that same feeling of enthusiasm by turning up the volume on the shonen fight boys. It would club characters over the head when they tried to drag the story back down to reality. The message is clear. Either indulge yourself in the ludicrous energy of the show, or at least don't be a stick in the mud for people who are enjoying it themselves. Although committed to its premise, Gurren Lagann would still poke fun at its own ideas. No one understood how stupid Kamina was more than Kamina's creators did. You can never be sure when a robot would magically combine, or Kamina would almost get someone killed by smashing two mechs together until they stuck. If you couldn't believe in the feeling, you could at least laugh at it. While Gurren Lagann's style and passion won over the crowd, the anime super served existing super robot fans by celebrating all their favorites. There are hundreds of heavy-handed references to GetintheRobot, Gao Gai Gar, Gunbuster, and Mazinger Z seeded throughout. Imaishi even admitted that Gurren Lagann starts in a desert because he was a huge fan of combat mechas. Combat muggles. I was like, all right, I'm on a roll. Imaishi even admitted that Gurren Lagann starts in a desert because he was a huge fan of combat mecha Zabungle. This would become Trigger's playbook when they'd release their first major TV anime production 7 years later. As the grandfather of Gridman, Gurren Lagann set a standard for including an entire encyclopedia of mecha references in their titles. Mecha and character designs, name references, poses, and attacks can all be traced back to a point of origin in a pre-2000s mecha series. Amamiya took this to new levels in Gridman, with nearly every shot in it acting as an homage to some tokusatsu or mecha moment. Fans believe even the main 4 characters' designs are inspired by the Shattered Glass line of Transformers toys. Years later, Kazuki Nakashima returned to write for Trigger's first big production, Kill la Kill. While his inspiration for Gurren Lagann came from GetintheRobot, Kill la Kill was unmistakably influenced by another collaboration between Go Nagai and Ken Ishikawa, Cutie Honey. A pioneer in shonen manga starring fighting women, super-powered clothes, and transformation sequences with a lot of skin. They took the same thing that made Cutie Honey revolutionary for its period and turned up the dial. Not only was Ryuko a female shonen lead, but she was fiery and belligerent like a typical shonen hero, complete with violent, destructive fights. Where Cutie Honey's sexy outfit transformations pushed boundaries in the 70s, Kill la Kill took it to the next level in the 2010s by, well, not really putting the clothes back on. Audiences could only wonder, can they actually show this on TV? And as before, Trigger went wild with the references. Each episode is named after one of Nakashima's favorite classical J-pop songs. Visually, Kill la Kill borrows a lot from a TV drama about a delinquent high school detective called Skeibandeka. Early ideas for Kill la Kill included a delinquent protagonist among an Otokogumi, or group of men. The delinquency obviously stuck around, but they ended up swapping out the lead. Ryuko's character design and literally every shot in the first ending sequence is a reference to Skeibandeka. And as far as references go, let's not forget the omnipresent stylized Eva block text. Where Gurren Lagann was unapologetically super robot, Kill la Kill put its influences into a newer story that could appeal to modern audiences. We'll touch on this later, but updating the story while keeping its essential elements the same was a necessary step for a 90s franchise about teenagers saving the world, or a world. Raising the stakes and modernizing story concedes to not ostracizing a new audience. Now let's go from superpowered clothes to magic. Bear with me on this one. Witches have been a lasting trend in the anime industry. They've crisscrossed with magical girls and undergone their own evolutions ever since Sally the Witch back in 1966? More recently, Magical Academy anime has become popular, likely due to a certain wizard book series, but the magic itself has grown into something codified and scientific, usually to serve as the foundation for supernatural battles. Nothing wrong with this. I mean, who doesn't like a good pick your favorite shonen story? I'm just saying, we've come a long way from Kiki's Delivery Service. In a way, I think that's what Yo Yoshinari may have been trying to recapture when he came up with Little Witch Academia. Ghibli was slowing down after their peak at the turn of the millennium, and stories about discovering magical new worlds were drying up, to say the least. Just like TV shows and anime, the magic in Little Witch Academia isn't there for you to figure out its function. What matters is how it makes you feel. Akko's character is practically a pair of goggles for the audience. From a normal family with no magical background, she's wowed by Shiny Chariot's magical performances. She's obsessed with discovering where her idol had disappeared to and recreating the sense of wonder Shiny Chariot had instilled in others. Maybe Akko should work for Trigger. Like any Trigger production, Little Witch Academia is overflowing with references to other Mahou Shoujo anime. But Yo Yoshinari hasn't credited any central inspiration for the work. He's talked about studying Western mythology and occultism for preparation, but America and Europe have so much fantasy literature, it's hard to guess what might have made it over to Japan and lit that initial spark. However, I would like to submit to you my personal theory by reading directly from the Wikipedia plot summary of a certain 1974 Jilly Murphy novel titled The Worst Witch. The Worst Witch is about Mildred Hubble, a young witch who attends Miss Cackle's Academy for Witches, a school of magic. Although well-intentioned, Mildred's clumsy personality leads the girls to disastrous situations, and she is thus considered the worst student in the school. The benevolent headmistress, Miss Cackle, is generally understanding, whereas Mildred's form teacher, Miss Hardbroom, thinks she just isn't trying hard enough. Mildred's friends include Maud Spellbody, a rotund, sensible girl who is always trying to avoid confusion, and Enid Nightshade, a practical joker who is more likely than Mildred to get them all into trouble. The three girls have a strong rivalry with Ethel Hollow, a highborn, snobbish, and vindictive classmate. Ring any bells? Little Witch Academia takes place at Luna Nova Magical Academy, which could easily be a reskin of Miss Cackle's Academy. And it focuses on protagonist Akko, who has a lot of growing pains as she learns to hone her powers. Then there's supportive teacher Ursula Callistus and grumpy teacher Croy, who's not impressed by Akko's antics. Finally, we can round out the similarities with Ethel Hollow's in-show counterpart, the elite witch Diana Cavendish. Now, it's fair to say that there's a lot of overlap between any series that focuses on magical schools, but The Worst Witch is a strong candidate for comparison. So is Harry Potter, of course. When I recommend Little Witch Academia, I always call it anime Harry Potter anyway. Which goes to show how smart Trigger is when it chooses which popular shows and tropes to remix into. There's just so much to go on, not just in the magical girl genre, but in the wider cultural landscape. It's a bit harder to directly connect any of the efforts from Little Witch Academia to Gridman, being very different and the passion projects of two different Trigger creators. But it pulled a ton of references from non-anime and Western medias that likely acted as integral stepping stones for Gridman's full-on adaptation of a live-action show straddling the line between Japan and America. That brings us to SSSS.Gridman, directed by tokusatsu and mecha superfan Akira Amamiya. Gridman is the most direct recreation of a single work the studio has made so far. It takes the title from both the original Japanese tokusatsu, Denko Chojin Gridman, and the Americanized version, Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, which, like Power Rangers, kept the costume action but swapped out the uncostumed cast with American actors. Both are now available in the US, but Tim Curry voices Killikon in Cyber Squad, so you know which one I'm gonna watch. Team Samurai in the Americanized version is a band of teenagers who join forces with a program called Servo. And by band, I mean in the musical sense, with the instruments and stuff. Together, they battle the evil military AI Killikon, who is transforming monsters created by the local sociopath demon child, Malcolm Frank. The monsters can cause all kinds of damage over phone lines and electrical grids, so Team Samurai fights to prevent the villains from creating chaos in the system. Just listen to a few lines from the TV show and you'll quickly pick up that the show hasn't really aged well.
Defragment this!
Even if you're not tech savvy, the fake jargon they use in the show is painful. Tales of traversing the net have had their stakes raised in our post-Matrix world, and both sides fighting their battles in a digital world doesn't really cut it anymore. Gridman is undeniably moodier than Super Robot or Shonen Classics, so Trigger was hell-bent on raising the stakes to maintain the same feeling of paranoia and danger. The result is a series where the villain's monster creations manifest in our world. Or maybe vice versa? When Gridman shows up though, it's pretty easy to tell that Trigger's at the helm. Wild exaggerations really sell the moments that must have stuck with the staff 20 years after they first saw them on their CRT televisions. When Samurai Caliber first transforms into a sword for Gridman, their glamour shot is an exaggerated version of a classic Obari pose. Every new arsenal combination, or Gridman transformation, is followed by a dramatic eye catch that was given some serious TLC. That kind of visual communication says it all. The people putting it together think it's awesome, and want you to see it the same way they do. As with Gurren Lagann, Trigger doesn't shy away from the inherent goofiness of the source material. They pay special attention to the kaiju to make them look and move like a person inside a foam rubber suit. Flying cars bounce off the ground rather than breaking or blowing up, just like the scale models used to make kaiju look city-sized. These choices may feel strange to the uninitiated, but any hardcore tokusatsu fan will find them endearing. Certain scenes were lifted almost directly from other tokusatsu and mecha. Gridman's strangely stuttering flight as he first emerges is a direct callback to a time-honored Ultraman visual. Amamiya's own loving attention to detail may have come back to bite him. He meant SSSS.Gridman to be a love letter to mecha anime legend Masami Obari. But Obari called out Trigger for their uncomfortably close cribbing of some of his iconic animation cuts from Brave Express Mike Guine. In an interview about SSSS.Gridman, Amamiya spoke of focusing on expression, which is a line that really stuck with me. I think Trigger has zeroed in on a seriously important facet of how we enjoy and remember the media we consume. It's not just an idea, a line, or a visual from an anime that sticks with you. SSSS.Gridman's interplay between social paranoia and over-the-top action left an impression, and Trigger has reorganized those components in a way that will create that same feeling in an audience separated by 20 years. Boiling an entire era or genre of anime into one package is impressive enough on its own. Gridman shows just what the studio is capable of, and represents a challenge to the rest of the industry to be able to do the same. I'm Kurt with GetintheRobot, your anime watch list. Consider subscribing, and thanks for watching.